a higher stature may be seated. Good morning, boy and girls. Let's try one more time. Good morning. Okay, well, it is fall break, and you guys get the awards for being here today. A lot of folks are out and about. Do you guys have fall break? Fall break? You know what that is, fall break? Okay, good. Well, I know Aoife does. So I have a question for you. This is an easy question. Who do you look up to in your life? Like somebody that helps you find your way. Somebody that, like if you got a question, you're going to go to them first to ask and see what the answer would be. Or somebody that you think, wow, I'd like to be like that person someday. I'm hoping this is going to be an easy answer. And my daughter's first. I did not, trust me, who knows? Yes, Aoife.
My mom and my sissies.
Your mom and your sissies? Is that it? Okay, we'll leave it at that. Your mom and your sissies. Okay. Good one. What about you? Anybody you look up to? Your mom and your dad? That's right. What about you? You look up to your sisters and your brother and your mom and your dad? Emma, what about you? Mom and dad. Anybody look up to their grandparents or an aunt or an uncle or somebody else in the family? Anybody else? Anybody look, you look up to your dad. That's what you're about to say, right? No. Who do you look up to, Aoife? Your Aunt Susan, who's here today. Well, that's a good answer. So you and I will talk about this later. So I ask you this question because interestingly enough, that second reading from Paul's, it's a big long reading, Paul's writing to Timothy. It's his second letter to Timothy, but it's really interesting. Paul mentions two people that he remembers who had faith and has passed that faith in Jesus on to other people. Did you guys happen to pick up who it was? It wasn't the dad at all, I'll just say that. It was Lois, the grandmother of Timothy, and it was Eunice, Timothy's mother. So do you guys think that by coming to church, you're being passed on or learning about Jesus? See, this is kind of what Paul is talking about. He's thanking Timothy that he had a grandmother and a mother that helped Timothy know about the faith that Paul is trying to talk about. Paul says at the end of it that it's the standard of sound teaching. And I think that's always what your grandparents and your parents want to hear you say, is that you're receiving sound teaching. But Paul is talking about coming to church and learning about the faith. So it's good to think about sometimes when you have questions about a lot of things, but sometimes you might have a question about Jesus. You might have a question about God. You might have a question that's related to the church, and you got to know who you're going to ask that question to. Aoife, I hope, might ask her dad about this. But perhaps it is good to have mothers and aunts and grandmothers and your whole family to help raise you. Paul thought so. Paul thought Timothy had good teachers in Lois and Eunice, his grandmother and his mother. So today, sometime along the way, thank your family for bringing you to church today. I mean, if you have a father who's a priest, you have to come to church, but still thank him for that. Occasionally, Aoife, my daughter. So let's look out at all these people that are here. It's their fall break too, whether they know it or not. Let's tell all of these people who it is who loves them. And you know who loves them because they help you know about that. And that is Jesus. So on the count of 3, I want you to tell them who loves them. You ready? 1, 2, 3.
Jesus!
Good job. Good job. Bible and your dad tells you so too. Good morning.
Good morning.
What does it mean when someone asks you if you have faith? Is it simply a question as to whether or not you believe in God? Are they trying to find out if you're a religious, church-going person or if you're a Christian? Or do they want to know perhaps if you believe in the miraculous or the supernatural in your life? And what does it mean when we ourselves as followers of Jesus say to someone that we are a people of faith? Well, my dear mother, for one, is a person I know who uses the word faith a whole lot. In fact, she tends to bring faith up at least once or twice just about each and every time we talk on the phone. There is certainly a guarantee that if I tell her about something I am struggling with in my life, she will almost immediately address it by encouraging me to just have a little faith and everything will work itself out. And usually when she says this, it makes good sense and works well, as when I have been worried about someone who is sick in our family or in the church, or when I am stressing about something I know I'm about to do that will be particularly challenging. In almost every one of those cases, reminding me to just have faith instantly goes to work to reconnect me to God's presence in my life and God's greater presence and omnipotence in all the world. But that's not the only place where my mother goes when she gives me the admonition to have faith. Sorry, the admonishment to have faith, that is. There have also been many a moment when we've been together just trying to find a parking space downtown, or to get a table at the last minute at a busy restaurant on the weekend. Then she has assured me that we just need to have a little faith. Or the many times when my stepfather, each and every Christmas, buys the entire family scratch-off lottery tickets, and my two older daughters each proclaim that this year they want to be the ones to win $50,000. Here again, my mother will also tell us that just need to have some faith, and God will sort it all out. Of course, as well-meaning as this is, the problem with this version of telling someone to have faith starts to feel a little too much like carrying around one of those old rabbit foot keychains, or hammering a lucky horseshoe up over your barn entrance. And please hear me out. I'm really not trying to throw my dear sweet mother, or anyone else for that matter, under the bus for this giving of faith. Actually, I'm simply trying to use her well-intentioned advice as a good example of just what we all struggle with when we throw out or try to understand the importance of the word faith. Faith, of course, is the central part of the Bible, of our prayer book, and just about everything else in our religious life and teachings. And yet understanding what having faith really means seems to only get more and more difficult in our modern world. In fact, the great Lutheran theologian and philosopher of the last century, Paul Tillich, once proclaimed that the word faith is the most misunderstood word today in the entire religious vocabulary. So what does having faith actually mean then? Is faith simply the same as saying we believe in something, or is it more about something beyond simply believing? And as professed Christians today, what do we really mean when we say that we are a people and a church of deep, abiding faith in God and Jesus Christ? Well, as challenging as understanding what faith is today in our lives and in our church, this certainly is not the only time followers of God in Jesus Christ have struggled with it. In fact, in this morning's gospel reading from the 17th chapter of Luke, it is the very first disciples of Jesus who we find asking him about how to grow their faith, how to increase their faith, and how to make their faith even greater. And I imagine that, like all of us would want, the disciples of Jesus were all hoping that when they cried out to Jesus, "Increase our faith," that he would have immediately pulled out his chalkboard, opened up a PowerPoint presentation, and began laying out for them a 10-point plan for various ways to understand faith and have more of it. A good how-to manual would have been perfect, of course. But as usual, Jesus takes a different route. He decides to take their simple request in a completely different direction. Jesus obviously wanted to challenge his disciples in the same way all of our best teachers and educators from our past high school, college, or professional training might have challenged us somewhere in the past. Jesus wants them to rethink what they just asked for, and in doing so, to try and work out the answer for themselves. Is faith something we need to increase for ourselves? Or is faith perhaps about something else beyond us entirely? So Jesus simply says this: if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, be uprooted and planted in the sea, and it would obey you. Well, for those who can indeed take just a second to think about and consider Jesus' response this morning, I don't think it'll take too long to realize that Jesus is taking the request of his disciples to learn how to do their own work, to expand and grow their faith, and he is turning it upside down for a purpose. Jesus is saying in just one sentence that even the tiniest, smallest possession of faith, not the largest, faith that is literally the minuscule size of the proverbial mustard seed, that micro amount of faith is all that's really needed to change the world. To translate this into a language we might understand better today, I think, as theologians and biblical scholars have said it before, Jesus is telling his disciples, and really all of us in the church today, that when it comes to faith, it isn't about the size of the window you are looking at God through, whether it's a tiny peephole in a door or a grand, large picture or multi-panel bay window. What's really important is what you are looking for and seeing on the other side of the window. It isn't us, it is God who is reaching in and giving us power and strength and hope, and indeed faith that transforms and faith that saves us. Jesus is trying to explain that it is seeing, believing, and putting our trust in God that can break into the heart and God's unfolding plan for us and for the world that makes up and enlivens the faith we are meant to have. So it doesn't matter how big or increased your faith may be. All that matters is that you find your faith and you trust in God and you hold on to it tightly with both hands, no matter what happens in your life or in what darkness tries to keep in and drown out God's light. This trust is what makes us Christians a people of faith. Faith in Jesus Christ over and above ourselves and our world and everything else that surrounds us. And what follows that passage this morning in the next set of confusing verses in Luke's gospel, I believe, is pointing us to a continuation of trust and deep humility for the God we see, believe, and who saves us. That is, that just as a servant whose job it is to serve someone else, we as people of faith have a servant's job to go out and do this for others. We do the work of the servant and of a slave to Christ, not because we deserve something in return for the hard work of the gospel. We do the work of a servant because God has already loved and served us so much that God sent his son Jesus to show us the way and to save us from sin, hopelessness, and death. And God certainly doesn't do that because God is indebted to us. We receive God's mercy, grace, and love freely, given through our trust and faith, and through it we accept our job to go share that glorious light and love with the world. Because what else would someone do who's received a wonderful bit of light freely but go out and give that light to a dark world that needs it desperately? And you don't just go out and do that through words, but putting our faith in work, in actions, is what it's all about next. becoming the hands and heart of Jesus to everyone we meet, reaching out to do good and doing our part to bring closer to fruition God's great work. And we do it all because we have found deep trust in God's promise and plan that God is completing for you and for me and for the entirety of creation. And that is what the basis of having faith is all about. One of my favorite theologians and evangelists today, Bishop Robert Barron, describes faith in this way. Faith, Bishop Barron writes, is an openness to what God will reveal, what God will do, and what God will invite each of us to become. And as Jesus seems to be saying this morning, if we just have even the tiniest bit of that faith in God, whether or not we get the right parking place or the right table at the restaurant, or we scratch off that lottery ticket on Christmas Eve and win $50,000, that's not what's the most important. Faith is more about pushing us in the church, you and me today, to do nothing less than become Christ in our world, to reshape, restructure, and help God restore the world to what God intended the world to be at creation, when a God of love and joy looked out at it all and said, "It is good." I'll leave you with a story that I think gives the church a perfect example this weekend of what even the smallest bit of faith can truly do in our life and in our community and in our world. The story is about a man who lived a good while back in the middle of a great city. He was born into a family that had absolutely everything, lots of money and privilege, and who were of a very high standing in their community. When he was a young man, like so many people of his standing before and since, he found it easy to live a very carefree life. When he grew up, he found himself always searching for more greatness, more prestige, more well-standing. Eventually, we are told this man joined a team of other men from his city to take their strength and skill against a team of powerful men in a nearby community. But for the first time, the man ended up with a true experience of loss and failure. Whatever he had could not save him from that loss and that failure. It seems that in that moment he realized that there must be something missing in his life. As this happened, he began to notice for the first time those who had less than him, those who suffered, and he began to feel that even with all he had, he was still living in an ever-impending, ever-growing darkness. One afternoon, the story goes, the man found himself seeking God, sitting in an old, dilapidated church outside of the city. As he looked up at a crucifix hanging over the altar, he suddenly felt what seemed like a crack to begin to form in his heart. And for the first time, he felt light of something other shining into his life. For the first time, he felt something that was so much greater than himself and than anything else in his life. A light that broke through, that caused him to suddenly realize Jesus Christ was the answer to his searching. That it could free him of the chains that bound him down with the mask and the image he was forced to live. In that moment of light, the man heard Jesus' own voice saying to him, "Go and repair my church," releasing him to let go of everything and get down to work, sharing the good news and serving others because he himself had been so served by love and grace by God in that moment. This man later became known for even preaching God's love to the birds and to the animals in his community, and singing out great canticles of God's love and grace in the sun and the moon and the earth and the water and the fire and the wind in all of creation. This man of true faith was born long ago in 1181 by the name of Giovanni di Pietro di Bernardone. But we all remember him today and will celebrate him this evening on the North Lawn as St. Francis of Assisi, as we offer good news of God's love and blessing to even the least of God's living creation, our beloved pets. And friends, you may feel like St. Francis is a little too high up the religious ladder for you this morning to attain in your busy, struggling life. I certainly get that. Not many of us can be as St. Francis of Assisi or Mother Teresa of Calcutta. But the good news this morning, brothers and sisters, is that Jesus doesn't tell his disciples they need to be great cedar trees of faith. In Luke's gospel this morning, Jesus simply pushes them to begin their faith with a tiny mustard seed. As Jesus says earlier in other places in the gospel, a mustard seed is the tiniest seeds, but it can become the greatest of shrubs that can grow and spread quickly and cover the entire ground in which it's planted. Jesus wants us, you and me, to begin with just a tiny drop of sincere trust and surrender to God through faith. And Jesus promises us that even the tiniest of drops of this kind of true faith already has the potential to not only change our world, but to change our lives for the better. Trust in God. This is what our faith is all about. So the next time someone asks you or encourages you to have a little faith, ask yourself what God would want you to do, and then trust God enough to put it into action. Amen.